Yo, people, welcome back to Fix It Boy. Now here with Ari and Javi.
Right.
We have a guest in the building who will cause a bag of trouble, or could be solving, fixing a bag of problems, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the principal character behind 876 DNA, Terron Dewar in the building.
Woo!
There we go.
Yeah.
Bless up, sir.
How you doing?
So
I'm doing good. I'm glad that I don't have to use this right now. I've no usage for this right now. That's what I don't know. Right now, I don't have any usage for these things right now.
God.
Well, bless up. Yeah, but tell us more about your company though, 876 DNA. First of all.
All right, so
And
876.
who you are. Introduce yourself to the people.
I am Terron Dewar. I'm CEO of 876 DNA Tests. And 876 DNA Tests is Jamaica's premier DNA testing company. So we have 64 locations across all 14 parishes and most major towns in Jamaica. So we have a location within 25 minutes of wherever you are in this country.
Like churches and KFC here.
Well, I mean, we're tackling a big issue as I can recognize, so we need the distribution.
I need it for real. Like how much you have in the town area?
In Kingston and St. Andrew, we have 7 locations. The 2 most central ones are in Halfway Tree. And we do a bunch of tests in Kingston and St. Andrew.
Jaja.
Town people have money.
I got that sound. So what really started, or what gave you the idea to start the business?
So how long has it been in operation?
All right. So we've been in operation for 24 months. And what gave me the idea to start the business?
Hold on. 24 months?
24 months.
I have how much branch already?
Yeah, man. A lot of work put in.
You working?
Yeah, a lot of work. A lot of work put in.
Who's
And
the
plus,
angel investor?
there's none. I own 100% of it. I want to so I put myself at great financial stress.
Your wife must be like this better.
Yeah, boy, you're onto something there. But yeah, the reason why we did 2 reasons. So one of it is a little personal. So one of my brethren, somebody who I grew up with, found out that his father was not his father when his father was on his dying bed in the hospital.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah, tough. So you actually don't need to be a blood match to give blood donation. But when he was in the hospital and they were giving blood, he recognized that based on what his father's blood type is and what his blood type is, they could not possibly be biologically related.
Wow.
And yeah, man, it do something to the youth. I tell you. And the worst part about it is that his mother had already passed 2 years ago. So he had no way of getting a resolution.
Yeah.
His father went to his grave knowing that his son, and it was his only son, because he had 3 other daughters, was not his son, and it changed him.
Change the son.
It changed his son. And then when I became a Justice of the Peace, so apart from signing documents, Justice of the Peace, the mediation work, and community development. And one of my very first mediation cases had to do with like a domestic affair thing, and paternity fraud was in the middle of it. It involved paternity fraud, a big stone that go very close to my head. A big stone that go very close to my head. And an uncle who is defending the lady with a machete. I'll never forget, all right? And then I recognize that, and then I recognize, hold on, but these people don't know a lot about DNA testing. It's not easily accessible as most people should be. And then it's also very expensive, as some people think. And then I thought, well, maybe I could offer a solution. So I figured out a way how to make it, to educate the public, which is what we're doing right now, to make it widely accessible, which is the reason why we have 64 locations across all 14 parishes and most major towns. And then we're working on the cost. We're actually the cheapest in the island right now. And we cut as we figure out how to make it better, we cut the prices.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the price now for those who want to?
So there are 3 ways they can get a DNA test with us. And DNA test is largely in 2 categories. So it's either personal for your own peace of mind. I'd be willing to say probably 80 to 85% of DNA tests done in Jamaica right now are for your own peace of mind, just to ensure that you're biologically related. The cost to do a personal DNA test if you come into one of our offices is $40,000.
Okay.
And then you have the trusted home DNA testing kit. Right? So let's say, for example, you don't want to come into the facility, you can't get access to the child, or you want to do a DNA test without disclosing to the mother, that is the child. People either order one of our home DNA testing kits, we send it out to you by beer or Knoxville Express, or you pick one up from one of our facilities. You do the mouth swabs 10 to 15 times in each side of the mouth, on the child and on yourself, put them back in the kit, label them with your name and date of birth, and send them back to us. We'll test them and send you your results via email pronto. these tests are 99.99% accurate. They're highly accurate. So DNA testing is not guesswork.
So what's
You
the
know?
turnaround time for the results?
5 business days.
Okay.
Well,
Fine.
5.
Fast.
All right, so hold on. Before we get more into the logistics of how the tests work, I'm sure you've done, your market research in regards, paternity fraud.
Right.
I see that it's something that's rampant here in Jamaica. It's almost like a pandemic, if you will.
Epidemic.
So from your vantage, epidemic, sure, whatever. Sure. So from your vantage point, though, right? What's one stat, or one piece of information out there in regards to paternity fraud that would surprise a lot of people?
70% of the calls and appointments that are set for DNA testing are done by women.
Really?
Yeah, most people don't know this.
Women.
So, women. And let me explain the logic behind it. So, Nara, your mother.
Watch it.
Yes, and I deliberately pushing my luck because I deliberately pushing my luck because you said you had no use, so you said it, right?
There's a trend going on for 2025.
I deliberately pushing my luck. So, don't believe that the mother of the men and the sister of the men are allowing people to take advantage of them. So, if a grandmother is suspecting that something is off, she's calling. Right? And same, your sister would do the same.
You know what? You are right. From
Yes.
stories that I've heard, is usually
New
girlfriends
girlfriends and wife. Yes.
Really.
Yes. So, and if they can't get this, if a mother can't get her son to test the child, she'll come to the test with the child herself. Because remember, as the child's grandmother, she and the child share 25% genetic material.
Right.
So she don't even need her son. A lot of that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, so aunts and uncles come to test. That category of test is called an avuncular test. Without
What kind of test?
avuncular.
Okay.
Yeah, aunt or uncle test is avuncular test. And then you have grandparents, which is grandmother and grandfather. They can test without the father being there. You can even test siblings. You have full siblings and half sibling tests. And that category of test is generally called a relationship test. But the most popular test is what we call a paternity test. Straight up between a man and a child. Yeah.
Mothers are they tested as well? Like the mother. So if it's like a family, so like me and Nara know we have a kid,
Mhm.
and
That's what
he's
the
like,
people want.
relax. And he's like, you get a man, it's not my kid. And I'm like, you son of a bitch, it is your kid. And like the two we go and I say, test us.
Right.
So he will get tested, I will get tested, and the child will get tested to kind of prove to make sure it's well. It is my child. It's not no switch up birth thing. So that happens as well.
That happens as well. So,
Okay.
so to do a standard paternity test, what you're really doing is an investigation of whether or not the child share any genetic material relationship with the man. Because remember, a child gets 50% of their genetic contribution from their father and 50% from their mother. So when you look at that chart, you should see the man's 50% contribution. So if you're doing a paternity test, you actually do not need the mother's present permission or consent in Jamaica to do the tests, right? Which is why I'm telling you, 40% of the DNA tests that are done in Jamaica are done without the mother's consent or knowledge.
Wow.
Right?
I'm sure that would have been an uproar.
They find out when something go wrong. A lot of the time, nothing goes wrong. All right, they keep it moving, But yeah, they find out when something go wrong. But we do test the mothers as well because it actually makes it easier for the lab to generate the results faster. Yeah.
Wow.
So
we
you
do
prefer when it's like the entire for like, especially if it's
it don't really change because the science is so precise. It don't really change anything. But what we like transparency. We're a company that is about the truth. Truth may be uncomfortable, as you can see, because 47% of all the tests we tested last year returned what we call adverse results, which mean you're not biologically related. We prefer transparency. So we actually prefer if the mother is aware and she's there to observe the process to recognize how highly methodological and top class it is. But the mother would actually don't require the mother to have to submit her sample to give you results that are 99.99% reliable.
Well, so one couple questions. You mentioned labs. Are there labs in each branch?
No,
Okay.
that's not how it works.
Okay.
So what
Don't
these areas are, they are collection sites.
Okay.
So 876 DNA tests run a 24-hour contact center.
wow.
Yes, we have people staffing it 24 hours a day. Because remember, we don't only serve Jamaicans, right? We serve Jamaican and the Jamaican diaspora. There are people in UK who are 6 hours ahead of us, remember this, right? These people, USA, Canada, with Germany, we do all sorts of tests, So what they do, they call into the contact center, and let's say for this scenario that these people are in Jamaica, the first thing them ask are, how are you there? We say, well, we have 64 locations in all 14 parishes and most major towns. Where are you? They say they're in Mandeville. And I'm picking on Mandeville for right now, for example's sake, because I'm about to make a point. If they're in Mandeville, we tell them, yeah, we have 4 locations in Mandeville. And the one that we're sending to is dependent on which day and time you choose to do your DNA test appointment. So for all intent and purpose, we don't have the stigma of a DNA test in place. Because what we have is partnership with medical doctors to collect your sample and a strict protocol, right? And then the samples are tested by our international lab partners. So the highest accreditation in the world is what we've brought to Jamaica.
All right, so return back to my initial question now. Do you find that men are slower to do paternity tests? Or is it that just the women are just quicker? Like, do you find that men are more willing to take on these jackets, if you will?
That's a great question. So there's something we need to understand. So we don't have the luxury of responding to these questions from an emotional place, like how the public discuss.
Right.
So all our discussions are what we call data-driven responses. So what we can tell you is this.
Women usually don't get that.
So 70% of the calls come from women, and I explained why, because it is, right? Yeah. But the cost of the DNA test is also not very cheap, right? So there's a pricing floor because we do accredited tests, internationally accredited tests, right? Okay. So you're talking about the cost to collect the sample, transport the sample, store it, then test it. And then if we were supposed to set up a lab in Jamaica, it would cost us probably north of 150 million. Because one piece of the equipment is probably about 40 million, and we need at least 2 for redundancy. And that is just the 2 main pieces. You're not talking about the ancillary lab equipment. And then
it's a mark, so angel investor, and it's not cheap business.
Yeah, it's not cheap. And then we need people with specialized skill sets who test them. So in our instance, all our DNA tests are tested by PhD-level lab technicians, and each test is tested twice. So that is what helps to kind of drive the costs. Yeah. So we just have to figure out, as we grow the company and we gain savings through scale, we pass on the savings to the public. I remember we're trying to make it as affordable as possible. Now, to directly answer the question that you asked about the men. So there are two categories of men who get jackets the least in Jamaica. Those who are the poorest, who are the bottom of the socioeconomic scale.
Makes sense.
Right? Because, again, jacket, one of the fundamental reasons behind paternity, paternity fraud is economical. Right. So they decided to assign this father because this father is probably better off for the child in terms of finances, right?
Assigned, meaning the female.
Yes.
They
are making determinations about the financial future of the
these
child.
Things clear. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, so they're making these, so they assign paternity to somebody who's financially better off. Right. And so a man who's at the bottom of the financial scale wouldn't fit that bill, right? And then men who are at the top, because we have access to disposable income, we can easily, it don't cost me nothing to spend 40 grand on a DNA test, right? So those two extremities we found. The prime candidates are for paternity fraud now are those in the middle who care enough to be good fathers, but don't have an earn to take care of a child, but don't have the disposable paternity income at any one point in time. She should load 40 grand extra on a test where it could have, may or may not be mine. You understand?
Like a 50%.
Right. So that is what we're seeing, and this is what the data is saying. Yeah. So, which is why we don't discuss the paternity testing and paternity fraud in a sensationalized manner. We don't, because we have too much data to operate that way.
I even was wondering, like, how you gather the data. Like, I'm like, and this is just from their 24 months of being in existence from your collection of data. You've gotten so many. You're saying like 60% of fathers do not inform the children of the change in the status of their biological relationships. So, like, even that, so that would mean that you're still in contact with the father.
Taking care of them. So how we operate, the way we operate this way is, remember, so we see a lot of studies about paternity fraud in Jamaica, right? And I've always often looked at what we call the methodology, how you go about collecting this data. And some of it, they ask questions like, they ask women questions, have you or anyone you know have committed paternity fraud, right? Which leaves room for wrong answer or lie. People tell lie, right? Because even though they're reporting their data in aggregate and they're not disclosing their identity, it can sometimes be funny for you to disclose to a researcher that yes, I've given paternity fraud. I know my sister who does it, right? In our instance, in our instance, we didn't actually set out to be a research company. Remember, we run a company, right? Right, and we are in the best position to give you accurate data about the issue in Jamaica. As a matter of fact, I often say to people, this is probably the closest to an accurate position around this issue because, again, our operation, at scale and scope of our operation, we have 64 locations in all 14 parishes and most major towns. Now, if we were trying to cause riot, we could actually tell you the paternity fraud rate in almost every town in Jamaica, because we have locations in these towns. So if you look at the data, if you look at the data, we've kept it at a parish level because we're not trying to sensationalize it. What we're trying to do is drive an educated conversation around the issue.
Yeah. But speaking about sensationalism, because you're recently in the news.
Yes, sir.
About, two entertainers and sports stars that have done tests, and it has been revealed that they are not the biological fathers of the children that they have. Mm-hmm. Now, why would you start such a rumor?
Oh, well, we didn't start. We didn't start any rumor. We didn't start any rumor. We didn't start any rumor. We didn't start any
just out there now. Just start a bag of speculation.
Well, we didn't start any rumor. So it's important that you understand this.
Yeah.
Confidentiality is a pillar of what we do.
Yes,
we never discuss individual clients.
Okay.
So you can't get any answers from us as it relates to who an individual client is. What we do is that a question was asked about who are the type of people who do DNA tests with 876 DNA tests. Wow. And the response was, we serve everybody from the average working man to sports stars and entertainers. So I mean,
no. But it seems like some specifying happened. How did that specification fall about?
So as I said to you,
no, you have to know how the specification fall about for real. Yeah. Two high-profile Jamaicans. Mm-hmm. Somebody specified.
Yeah, man. So, and that was me. Okay. So, as I said to you before, we don't speak specifically about clients. You can't ask us anything about a client, right? Okay. You have to go to our lawyers for that information. You have to source, and I don't even know how you're going to get that data, right? Because we don't store the data in that way. Mm-hmm. So, we never speak about individual clients. We report data in aggregate because, again, our intention is to not be sensational about it. Our intention is to lead a data-driven conversation around it that can probably inform some national policy discussions around it. Because obviously we're dealing with a big issue, right? I mean, the people have it all over the world, and snippets that Jamaica leading number one in paternity fraud.
Yeah, Nigeria second.
And Nigeria is second. Yeah. And I think we 876 DNA Test is in the best position to partner with maybe governmental or non-governmental agencies to drive a social campaign to educate people about the implications of paternity fraud, what we're seeing, how you go about not preventing it and curtailing it, and then also understand a functional understanding that the fact that, as some sociologists say, Jack, it have a functional nature in this society.
What's that about that? Yeah. Hold on, before we get any further to that. Because you say, you never want to, or you're not in the business of sensationalizing. But this, in essence, did because, from the story put out, there's been a lot of speculation and all these things. So, when you see, the speculation out there in
we've seen it. We've seen it.
Internet streets and the TikTok.
We've seen it.
What do you think about it?
I think that people should understand that social media is not a place where you can speak without implications. And these speculations have real life effects on people's mental health and like family dynamics.
911 guy that got told about him.
We saw it. We saw some of these things, and we see some of the names are calling, and those people have never walked into a 876 DNA test facility. But again,
can you say that again, please?
Those people have never walked into an 876 DNA test facility, right? But again, we don't speak about individual clients, right? We don't. You can't access anything about an individual client. As a matter of fact, the data is stored in under 6-key two-factor authentication. It takes so much to access that data because we've made sure that the data is secured. So
because privacy matters.
No, confidentiality is the crux of this whole thing. I mean, once you have one breach, the whole entire thing goes down, and we're acutely aware of this. We're acutely aware.
So these tests were done within the last 24 hours. These two high-profile people.
When it's a 24 hours,
24 months. Sorry, my bad.
Naro, we don't speak about individual clients.
I don't see.
Literally, he
I
was
just
asking
said
the
that.
question. Why? Who are the
I'm
I'm doing my job. I just want to know. I just want to clarify.
Keep doing your thing.
Where these two people did they fall to your company within the last 24 months?
And we don't speak about individual clients. We've been operational for 24 months. So it means by logical deduction, 24 months is a feasible timeline.
In those instances, like with the entertainers or sports stars, is it the same case with the women who come to you and say, hey, we want testing, or is it like the actual men coming for it? So like the celebrity, the star.
So Javi, I think I see the journalist thing. All right. So what I'm gonna do about this particular thing, I'm gonna give you an answer because I'm gonna give you an answer around that. In those events, if I remember correctly, the men were the one who initiated their own test.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say about it.
All right.
Who are they?
We don't speak about we never speak about individual clients.
Question. So people can come to the facility and you have the home testing kits, but you also have the baby bump paternity test now. So people can get DNA tests as early as 7 weeks.
Yes. So there are 3 ways you can get a DNA test with age 76 DNA test. The most popular way is to come into one of our facilities. And we have one probably within 25 minutes of wherever you live in Ireland, right? And then the second way is you can order a home DNA testing kit. So you order it online or over the phone. We send it to you via Knoxville Express, and there's a bunch of them there. If you're in the KMCA corporate area, we send it to you via Beera, or you can pick one up at one of the 64 facilities for expedited access. You collect the samples yourself at home, return them to us, we test them. The third way is our mobile lab team. So we have a fleet of private vehicles, them unmarked, them look like normal vehicles on the road, because we're not trying to attract the stigma, that come directly to you to collect your DNA samples at home or at the hospital. So the youngest baby we've tested is 1 hour old in the hospital. As soon as the baby born, the father call, hey, you need a test, right?
Get this done now.
Right. And then you have what we consider to be the ultimate DNA test, which is a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, where you can tell who the father of a fetus is from as early as 7 weeks gestation. And that's a fancy word for mean 7 weeks pregnant.
Right.
So while the baby is just developing, there are fetal DNA floating around in the mother's blood. So you take 2 vials of blood from the mother and a buccal swab, which is a fancy name for a mouth swab from the father, and you extract the fetal DNA from the mother's DNA from that 1 vial of blood, and then test the fetal DNA against the father's DNA. So as you can see, it's quite sophisticated, and that drives the costs. $285,000 for something.
Because it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, pretty expensive. And that's done overseas as well. $285,000 for that, and we're working on it because we believe the cost can come down a little bit. So remember, we're operating on 3 pillars. Confidentiality undergirdle everything, but we want to drive education around the issues. We want to increase accessibility, or we want to make it more affordable. And that's what we're working on.
Is there a shame for you? Because you keep on talking about, like, I guess confidentiality, and then you say unmarked cars because stigma. So there is a shame of fathers questioning the paternity of their children. So is that something that you find too when the people come into you and it's like,
that's a great question.
Sure,
That's a great question. So you have to remember, fatherhood and motherhood, because I hear all the time you mention your family, right? It becomes a part of your identity, right? And you already know how this thing works. Now, them people, this is the reason why them ask you when you come for the truck. Because they think fatherhood is become a part of my identity. Yeah. Now imagine that being a...
get too old now.
Right.
You're not bullying me.
You're not bullying me, right? So if that becomes a part of your identity and then it is suddenly revoked, then you understand what that does to you, right? So you have men who have eternal shame about it, man. They don't disclose the results to the family member. They don't talk about it to the kids. And nobody else knows except them. So one of the things that we do as a company, every client who does a DNA test with 876 DNA test get access to free counseling and mediation.
Yeah, which I thought is very, very good.
Because again,
you talk to them. You said within 36 hours you reach out to them.
Within 30, so we tell them every client has it. We pay for it. We have a team of counselors and mediation. We pay for it. You don't cost you anything. As a matter of fact, the clients who've accessed the service sometimes take up so many sessions that it almost makes the test free or it costs us. Again, we don't mind, because guess what? Only 5% of the people take it up, which is horrible. Jamaican people don't like talking to counselors, you know.
No.
Right? It's a global problem, but Jamaican, we feel like we can deal with everything ourselves.
But just realize, there was just a study or a finding in the Jamaica Observer says 67% suicide happened last year, and 61 of them were men.
Yeah, man. And all right. So I'm glad you said that point, because that's gonna lead us to our next conversation around mandatory DNA testing, and why it is 876 DNA Test's position that we're not yet ready for that at this point in time. Because if you look on the statistics over the last 4 to 5 years, there have been between 10 to 12 murder suicides in this country on average, right?
Right.
The second most prevalent triggering those murder suicides, paternity fraud, is at the middle of it. Right. So, which is why we're saying we don't have the luxury of talking from an emotional place about this thing, because we have access to too much data, right? We know what's happening. We are calling the people. So, of the 95% of people who decide not to take up our counseling and mediation support, even though we're paying for it, we've told our team, once they have an adverse result, call them within 36 hours. This is how we know a lot of the insights that we know. This is how we know. You might say, "Why this hurt?" But I'm gonna continue to take care of this child.
Was the decision to offer the counseling service data driven as well?
Yeah. And it's also a philosophy that I have. So remember, we started this thing to help. Right? Obviously we're running business, but what I consider it a social enterprise.
Yeah.
Right? So it can be enterprise with a social impact.
That's the Ministry of Justice is on it, because I'm assuming it's restorative.
Right, but that is a British accreditation standard. But again, I'm glad you said that, because I believe the conversation should be partnerships with governmental agencies and NGOs to really understand what is happening, and then try to develop some social campaigns and some social interventions driven by data to support it. So we don't believe that Jamaica is yet ready for mandatory DNA testing, and I also believe we're using the public is using the wrong word to describe what it wants. The word mandatory is the wrong word. So so again, if you apply some intellect to it, you understand what the people are asking for. They believe that the paternity fraud and paternity misallocation rate in Jamaica is too high. It is ridiculously high, right? And they believe that there should be a way for some certainty or some reasonable level of certainty around the issue, right? Now, what they actually want is increase access and affordability to it. Because the word mandatory, there are very few things in a democratic society that is mandatory. The government could mandate you to take the COVID vaccine. Just think about what we're talking about, right? They created restrictions around it. But people still had an option. I want you to think of tell me one thing in this society, in a democratic society, that is mandatory. Pick one off the top of your head.
Taxes.
Because God knows. Look at that. Look at that. You have to come down to
the constants in life.
Between
it and debt.
Taxes and debt, right? There are very few things that are mandatory, which is why we think the word mandatory is the wrong word. But we understand what they're asking for. They want, if a man has, or anybody has any uncertainty, that the ability for confirmation is readily accessible at the earliest possible point, and it should be affordable. Now, a national policy around mandatory DNA testing, apart from all the ills that it can trigger, if it's not paired with the adequate mediation and counseling support, who's going to pay for it? If it's mandatory, the public has to pay for it, You know this, right?
Right, because I guess you disagree totally with the MP.
Terron Clark. So listen, again, because we are a data-driven company, what we're trying to do is foster national conversations and all points contained on the square, right? So that is his position. Most people who take some of these positions, they come from an emotional place. Again, but once you have conversations around the issue and you present these data are irrefutable. We're not making up the data. This data is actually coming from our business operation. We're not speculating who has been a victim of paternity fraud. We know. We talk to them every day. We know. We're not speculating, right? So once you start having a conversation around this issue and you recognize that you have the data supported, people tend to soften their positions because they recognize that is a data-driven, a factual position.
So one of the reasons why, because I saw another anecdotal, but it was on This Is a Blast, Big Up Yourself, where them is a lawyer in Jamaica, where the mother was insisting that the father pay more.
I saw that.
Right, that the father pay more in child support. And then them judge, so him, like the father's like, "Me nah hardball or whatever, like So no, I could play hard bad. Let's do a DNA test. And once the DNA test came, he wasn't the father, and I guess that he legally wasn't responsible financially for the kid. So I'm like, I think the reason why I believe in mandatory DNA testing or make DNA testing
widely accessible
is because I think that child support is a major issue for men. Because I think a lot of men just say, I'm not the kid, father, and like they say it and they opt out of taking care of their responsibilities,
right? Of,
you know, like especially their financial responsibility. Whether them no one do it emotionally, that's their business, but financially, because it takes cash to care. Right. So I feel like that is reason why I believe in it. So if you are accusing me, fine, accuse me. But once you find out that you are the father, we're gonna make sure that the court, the law of the land put you on a payment plan to ensure that you financially take care of your responsibilities.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that because
the men?
There's
the woman.
There's nothing wrong with that.
About the men.
No, but me still say the woman them go to jail.
So again, because we're encouraging national discussion, both points can contend.
Right.
Because we agree with you. If you procreate and this child is your biological child, you should, as a man, stand responsibility of the child's well-being, right? And if it requires the law of the land to enforce that, fine. Now I heard Nara's point again to say send them to jail. I mean, I probably wouldn't take that perspective, but I also want to introduce Nara that it is already illegal in Jamaica. Under Registration Act of Birth and Death, it is illegal to name a wrong person on a birth certificate. It actually comes with a fine of $250,000. Wow. Or up to 3 months in prison. The conversation then there is, has any case been prosecuted in probably since independent Jamaica around it? You know, and some learned counsel probably should do some research around that. But it's already, the constitution already made, and the laws already has some accommodation for that.
Jail me, say.
No, I know your position. We know your position. But again, earlier, I mean, as a DNA testing company, I probably should separate this point from 876 DNA test, right? But earlier, I made what can be considered a controversial comment that paternity fraud and jacket has somewhat of a functional
yes, I want to
it's very controversial, right? And I probably should say it's probably not the position of 876 DNA test, but as a well-read person, I understand this. And let me explain why to you. So, the youngest person we tested in 2024, apart from the non-invasive test where you test on fetus, right? It was 1 hour old. We went to the hospital to test the person. The oldest person we've tested was a 92-year-old man, right? Tested against 64-year-old son, not the father. Now, based on all that data that we're testing, people assume or think that most DNA tests are done between kids and fathers. And it does happen. There's a lot, right? But there are a lot of tests that are done with adults and their adult parent and relationship because people are still trying to find their identity, right? So what we looked at, when we saw the data, on average, adverse results of paternity fraud was discovered at age 15 in the 2024 data. So 15 years of thinking one thing and then discovering the other thing, right? Not related. Or this person who I thought was my father was not my father. This person who I thought was my grandmother was not my grandmother, right? 15 years. So when we look now, we recognize that 50% of the men who has discovered that they're not the child's biological father continue to take care of the child, right? And we're associating that with once an active father who has been a dad. Because there's the next thing we figured out too. The word dad is emotional and the word father is biological. You can be a dad without being a father, right? Once you actively participating in the child's life and financially taking care of the child and the bond has established strongly over 5 years, the probability or likelihood of you abandoning the child having learned this adverse result is significantly lower, right? And then in some instances, as I said to you before, men who are at the lowest end of the socioeconomic scale get less jacket and men who are at the highest because they can afford for tests, right? In some instances, the paternity fraud or the assignment of parentage is done because of economics. The mother is looking out for who is the best father for the child. Who can guide the child through life and provide. Right? and if you look at it, when you understand who the child's father is and who the child has been assigned with, in 60% of the time, the child turn out better off. Right? Because the child has been assigned to somebody who can carry the child through life.
Yeah.
So, which is why I'm saying, if you look at it from what we call a functional perspective, it has some functional perspective.
So that you're saying that it's somewhat of unnecessary evil?
I want to say, because we're a company that speaks about the truth. We believe in the truth, right? And the truth can sometimes be uncomfortable, but it's the truth. So even the fact that 60% of people who discover that their father and the wrong child don't end up telling the child. At some point in time, we have to sit down and think, all right, so we think we're saving the child, but at what point in time do we communicate to the child what their true lineage is, even though they're not biologically related? And that's something that we're working on with our counseling and mediation team, and we'd like support on it. There are a lot of people in civil society and in government who probably can better inform our position on it, so that we can better educate our clients around how they should approach this sort of scenario. Because knowing your roots is important.
Absolutely.
Knowing your roots.
But
medical conditions, when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, do you or anyone in your family have this condition? And you're confidently respond, no, not knowing all your roots. You understand? So these things are important, which is why I was saying the education around it is important. We want to lead the charge in terms of the national discussion around, how we have that kind of.
So hold on, we don't want to ask this though, like, how many relationships them thing are mash up? Like, how many relationships, like, a man say, I want to do a test, and their idea of, doing a test in the female's mind is like, why you said to me?
We done. That's a big question. Yeah. All you need to do is you can pick sentiments from social media right now. Look on social media and say how much people say, you do a DNA test and ask them to do a DNA test. Yeah, you can go do a test, but we're done.
Yeah.
That's one of the sentiments, right?
Yeah.
Which is why, and I know, I read this one in your position. Tell me, what you say about that? What's your position on it?
I wouldn't care. I mean, you want to know, but I'm confident that the result will be.
But then, if you know that is yours, like, then you would show that you don't trust me.
But you have women who some of the women who call to do DNA testing are mothers who have been accused of paternity fraud, who call to defend themselves. So that position is a real position. But the question he asks is how much relationship has it damaged when men ask, hey, I want to do a DNA test, and because of just the insinuation of distrust, a lot, which is why 40% of the DNA tests that were done last year, the men did it without the permission, presence, and consent of the mothers. Right? So them take them for a weekend, or take them go look for family members and carry them in at the facility, or them buy a home DNA testing kit, get it delivered via Knoxville Express, them do the swabs and send them back to us. Nobody knows any better. 40% of the tests are done that way. But then you have bigger issues. I believe.
Up to 40. How many of them are adverse findings?
All right. So what we'd have to do now with that data is extrapolate what we see nationally.
Okay.
It's almost 1 in 2 because it's 47% adverse findings. So what it really means, what this 47% means, and I want to use this opportunity to clarify it. It don't mean that 47% of every picnic in Jamaica jacket, as we've seen and in commenting. What it means is that of the people who have doubts in their biological relationship and who have sought confirmation through a DNA test with 876 DNA tests, as the island's leading DNA testing company, 47% of those who've taken a test end up finding out, say, them suspicion correct. They're not related. And that is what it really means.
How many, can you give us the aggregate total of the how many
DNA tests? That's a good question. So in our adverse report, you recognize that we have the data listed as selective disclosure. There's a reason why we selectively disclose the data, because it gives great insight into the scale and scope of our business and somewhat can erode our competitive advantage. Part of our sauce is in that. So what we've done is that we've selectively disclosed that data to people, governmental agencies, to NGOs, to researchers who can help us to craft national policy around it. So it's not something that we're comfortable disclosing so everybody know what the numbers are, but we've selectively disclosed it to people who can help us to move the agenda forward in a meaningful way. Understand? But just let me tell you something. I'm going to give you some high-level perspective around it. Why we don't claim that this is a national study, I want the people to understand that we are acutely aware that for a country of population size 8.62 million people, if you want to do a study within a margin of error plus or minus 3, you need at least 1,067 samples. We're acutely aware of this data. What I'm going to say to you here is this. Our sample size is far in excess of that number. So we don't claim it to be a national study because we never set out to be a research company. This is just the data we're seeing from our operation. So we see people asking about the sample size, and we've explained that the reason why we don't disclose the sample size, but I just want you to know that we are acutely aware of what the research parameters are.
No, but if you have 64 locations, and I'm sure the 64 locations are active and busy,
yeah, man.
You have sell out in the DNA and the home DNA testing. I'm assuming at a 2.9 now, eh? Yeah.
And then you're talking, there's something that you haven't tackled as yet. So now again ask a big question about how much relationship it damage, right?
Like how much more type scenes have you seen?
A lot. But really? A lot. But I wanted to understand something. So a lot of this audience is international.
Yes.
Right? I have cousins overseas who watch this thing every day. We chat about the fix every day. Right? On WhatsApp, right? Now, we have the ability to do what we call international DNA tests. So we do a lot of tests daily between people who are in the United States, Canada, England, and all over, and people who are in Jamaica without either party requiring to travel. I want you to understand this. If you're in the United States, all you need to tell us is your zip code. We can find a partner facility within half an hour of you to have your DNA sample collected, and the party in Jamaica can go to any one of the 64 locations collected. No, I want you to understand something. You see, these tests return a lot of adverse results. And why people are doing these tests? A couple reasons. One, remember, some of these people who are in these larger markets are supporting families locally. And when they really assess the struggle they have to go through to send back remittance, some of them want to make sure, right? So that is one of the things.
And another they start to cut about the finding of visa, like citizenship
big
to
issue.
go over, right?
Big
that
issue.
was when most people found out
big
that they're
issue.
not father.
I'm going to tell you a story about that. So what a lot of people have discovered is that the filing process is a lengthy process and very expensive, right? The DNA testing requirement in that process is at the end of it, after you've invested thousands of dollars, right? Now, so you do these tests, and at the end of the process, a DNA test result is sent to the embassy, and then you discover at that point in time that you're not biologically related. So a leaked cable from the US embassy a couple years ago actually showed that 1 in 10 person who go to the embassy are not biologically related. So imagine this: you go to and remember, you don't, for these embassy cases, you don't get the results in your hand. The results are sent directly from the lab to the embassy. So you travel to the embassy as one happy family in one car, and you leave broken. Because somebody around a window is going to tell you you're not biologically related. Now, what we see the people in the international markets are doing, some of them just need peace of mind, and they cannot travel. And if you're in Canada or England, they give us their, what we call their postal codes, and we find a facility close to them. Or if they're in the United States, they give us a zip code, and they do a DNA test without nobody traveling. Very affordable, right? And then you have the people who are doing the filing process and have figured out that, before I'm going to invest these thousands of US dollars, I'm going to do a cheap personal test before I invest. And we've seen a lot of that. That is what is driving some of the DNA tests. And a number of them have discovered that they've made the right choice because they're not biologically related. We save them the cost of spending these money and then figuring it out in the end.
In the long run.
So the issue is a complex and nuanced one. And we have to just approach it that way. It's not rare conversation. I mean, look at that is good for social media. But then once they're on a platform like this, who has responsibility of not only educating, but not only entertaining, but educating people, then we have to approach it that way.
You said something earlier. You said that there's a difference between paternity fraud and paternity shifting. And you're saying that most of the women who commit paternity fraud, they're not knowingly committing fraud. It's almost like paternity shifting. So can you
I understand what you're saying. Great. So fraud, the core in that is fraud. So fraud is a deliberate, paternity fraud is a deliberate assignment of parentage, knowing fully well that this father is not the child's child, right? So that is fraud. Now, paternity misalignment or misallocation is you assign parentage to somebody without the full knowledge that it is. So you may a female may be having two intimate encounters with two men in close proximity to each other, and she genuinely don't know her data conception, right? So maybe the assumption is made that the person who she's most frequently with is that person. You may have had intimate encounters with this other person one time or two times, right? But we all know that's what it takes to get pregnant. All it takes to get pregnant. And most people don't find out that they're pregnant until after they've missed their period. Typically about 6 weeks in. Then they say, oh, hold on, I haven't seen let me go do a pregnancy test. Then for you to track back that now, especially if you're having back and forth encounters. So you have genuine instances and in a lot, and we can confirm that because our wellness calls to the fathers and to the mothers tell us, yo, bro, we know when them, in a lot of instances we can determine when them are fake and when them really them shocked. Because we've had women who request secondary testing. People are asking, all right, I don't want to do a mouth swab test, I want to do blood because they believe blood is more effective when it's not. Buccal swab and blood has the same level of efficacy. But they want to do it. People are saying, if this child is not for this man, this child is not my child. I want to test this child because I can't be the mother.
So then that's the case.
Yeah, people have done that. So they genuinely don't know.
What's the most amount of time any one person has done tests?
4.
We
have whole heap of instances. 4. And I don't want to answer any more of this question because, again, you know our policy already. We don't discuss any of that. But we could tell you story.
Tell one story.
If we believe that the Jamaican society, if we believe that it served the mission that we had in terms of educating people about the availability of DNA tests, the ramifications of paternity fraud and make it affordable, if we believe that it served the mission to advance those objectives, we probably could have launched a more show. But it don't serve the mission. What it does, it creates sensationalism around it, and we're not that company. Yeah, we don't do rare marketing around it to drive sales. We're not interested in that. People have called us.
The Star Store, they drive a little business.
It drove inquiry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Inquiry, that's the next thing too.
Who is it?
It drove inquiry. People asking us these questions like, you can't get those answers from us. Right? In another instance, I am the vault. Right? I'm not a penetratable vault. I'm the vault. I understand what I'm saying? I want you to understand that. So you can access these answers from us. You know, so we see a lot of things, man. We have people, you have people, who've left Jamaica, left the house, rent out the house, use the house to take care of the kids, and when you do a paternity test, just to put things in place to find out none of these kids are theirs, Yeah, people who said, and we're not talking about single kids, you have multiple kids, and not just multiple kids with one woman, not multiple kids with one woman, multiple kids with different women. Yeah, people who schedule facility, because, of course, we're a company of confidentiality and discretion. We've had fathers who schedule 2 or 3 mothers to test different children, and we schedule them at different times. One at 9, one at 12, one at 3. Nobody knows any difference.
Wow.
And 2 or 3 turn out. We're a company of discretion.
So right? I think that's why you're even seeing with even paternity fraud. That's why, or you're not saying that there should be cases of penalty like that in terms of jail time or even pain. It's just genuinely most times women don't know.
I wouldn't say most times. Yeah. Right? Our inferences didn't indicate most times. Because sometimes when we talk to them, we can get a sense. We can get a sense.
I'm going to ask you.
We can get a sense.
More time and say, no.
We can get a sense.
And then you just say,
we can get a sense. Yeah, and also, I mean, we're not trying to out. We've had people who want to do, like, the father's requested a DNA test, and the mother want to be sure, so she first even do a test with the other person, just to exclude that, such our confidence level is a little higher going.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You understand?
I mean, that's smart to do.
It's smart to do, and we have the ability to cater. We have the ability to cater with people. We don't even need to have 2 people in the same place. So just the same way how we do it with the international test. People we have people in Westmoreland testing with people who in St. Thomas, and them decide them not travel the highway, right? So you can go in different facilities. So
what is this? The 2024 statistics adverse results by Parish.
Right.
What's happening in Hanover, Manchester?
Right.
60%, 70% for Manchester.
All right.
That's very high.
I have to pull up my arm map and say, wait.
Yeah, you have to go and when we were designing this graph, we made the assumption that people had a good visual understanding of how Jamaica was laid out, right? But importantly, it doesn't mean that 70% of the children in these parishes are jackets. What it means is that of all the tests we've done in these parishes, that is a percentage of the total number of tests that return adverse results. So, for example, you see Mandeville, which is a call-out figure, because it's the highest, 70%.
Right.
we do a bunch load of tests in Mandeville. Mandeville people have money. They pay for the tests, right? A lot of DNA tests, and it just turned out that of all the DNA tests that were done in Mandeville in 2024, 70% of them returned adverse results. And as a matter of fact, because we have locations in most parishes and most towns, we could actually tell you adverse results per town. But we didn't, because it don't serve the mission, which is to educate people, to make it widely accessible, and to make it affordable. The only 2 towns we called out on this map were Spanish Town and Portmore. And the real reason why we did that was because Spanish Town and Portmore are major markets. Yeah. Right? So in the parish of St. Catherine, we have locations in Spanish Town, Portmore, and Linstead. We didn't include Linstead there. We only did 2 tests in Linstead last year. Statistically irrelevant in comparison to the amount of numbers that we're talking about. But so we broke out of that 55% you're seeing somewhere on the screen, as I didn't know. Of that 50% you're seeing. 67% of all the DNA tests done in Spanish Town returned adverse results. And then 37 is that number? 35 in Portmore. 35% of the tests in Portmore. So again, our intention is not to vilify these places, it's to drive national conversation. So if you are looking at the data and you decide you're going to do a social impact campaign and you want to go on the road, it's supposed to tell you where you carry the road show go.
You know, and what I realize, it drives misogyny, because there's a lot of people who kind of like ventilate them anger towards women from these findings that I say, like, you realize that's the case.
Yeah, we see a lot of that, and we don't encourage it. Yeah. So our intention is to not to vilify women, right? But we don't encourage it. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of things that we could pull from that data. There are a lot of things that we could pull from that data that could speak to that fact. But when we really think about the mission, it don't serve the mission, right? And remember, what we're trying to do is to drive credible, data-driven conversation around the issue. That is what we're really trying to do. So what we're telling people, man, listen, if you have doubts, do a DNA test. And if you want to do a DNA test, just call 876 DNA. And literally that, you know, I don't know the company's number, but if you want to know the company, look on your phone and dial 876 and spell DNATEST and it will call us. Right? I don't know the number. Right? So call, because what it does, it helps us to drive awareness, and we can give you a true reflection of what is happening in the country around the issue.
Is there an expiry date? Like,
no, our DNA testing kits, and listen, very soon you'll be able to pick up one of this in every major pharmacy. Okay. Right? So what we're trying to do is, this is our home DNA testing kit. You walk in a pharmacy, you buy a DNA testing kit, just like you're buying a normal thing, a COVID test, a HIV test, a pregnancy test. Our intention, you do the swabs and then you come pay for the testing of it. Again, remember, our objective is to make it widely available and as affordable as possible, and we're working on it.
So what's the cost of these?
$35,000 currently.
Okay.
35,000. So for $35,000, you can eliminate all doubt with 99.99% certainty. Okay. So men, join the 99.99% club. Sure. Do a DNA test with 876.
So you're leaving these off with us, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I thought you said you had no use. I thought you said you had no use.
I said right now.
Yes. I mean, the cotton tip applicators are sterile. As long as you don't pull them out of the sterile pack, they're awesome.
Okay. So there was no special testing and there's no expiry date. So it's good. Okay.
Yeah,
so tell the people them where them can follow you.
All right. So
and the business.
So 876 DNA tests everywhere. So at 876 DNA tests on Instagram. If you want to browse our website and see everything, just go www.876dnatest.com. And if you want to talk to somebody, you can call or WhatsApp us 24 hours of the day. It don't matter where you are. Just WhatsApp 876 DNA test. I don't actually know the number, as I said to you before, because the number is 876 DNA test.
And it is 876 362 8378.
Yes, just dial 876 DNA test on your phone, whatever that's there.
I know you're focusing on 876 DNA test now, but you still operate campus stores?
Yeah, man, I still run the 5 locations up on the U campus.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're planning on expanding?
I think I can confidently say no. Campus Cuts is a business that I started with my late brother, OJ Dewar. And a good youth, right? And losing my brother shaped the dynamics of many things. If I had my brother, this business would be I don't even want to tell you what this business would be right now, right? So we keep Campus Cuts alive to serve the university population and in memory of my brother. And campus can be a tough market because 4 months out of the year there's nobody there. Which means I largely finance it out of pocket in those months. But you're talking about my brother's legacy. And people say you die 2 times, the day you die and the last time somebody call your name. And it's my responsibility to ensure that his legacy lives on. So that's why I do it.
Okay.
Shout out to you, bro. You're doing God's work out there.
And OJ is proud.
Good youth. Think of yourself, bro.
That was Terron Dewar, CEO of 876 DNA. Get a pack today. That right.